Hello YouTube, this is Flights in Asia, and this is the aviation and travel updates from the Asia Pacific for this week, the week of June 16. And in this edition, we are going to start off in China, where we're actually getting some news from a new development from the China's Eastern Group of airline. Now, the Shanghai-based carrier has recently announced over this weekend, actually, a plan to develop a new airline that will be based on Hainan Island. Now, for those who are not familiar with Chinese geography, the island of Hainan is considered China's Hawaii and is located on the southeast part of the Chinese mainland. And in this island, there are two airports, Sanya and Haikou, with the Haikou being the busiest. Though this new airline is gonna be based in Sanya's airport. Um, the airline has been named Sanya International Airlines, and will have China Eastern take a 51% stake, majority stake of the airline, along with its subsidiary Junyao with 15%. Now, this joint venture is going to be in partnership with two other firms, the Trip.com, Chinese-based Trip.com, and also two provincial government entities from Hainan Island. And the aim of this company is to boost the tourism industry on the island of Hainan, which actually, as I mentioned before, is China's Hawaii. And the reason for that is because of the tropical climate, and it's known as it has some attractions that generates a lot of visitors from the mainland coming there for R&R. So with that said, um, also another thing too that the Chinese government is also looking to make the island become more of a free trade zone as well as international tourist hub. And it's important to note this island has I believe has visa restrictions eased over the past few years for certain countries. I don't have the list off my head though. This is something that I think we'll be seeing, and the Chinese government is going to be using this airline to develop the industry on the island, among other things. The Shanghai-based carrier has been making news with this over this weekend, and Shanghai will also see some flights in July as several airlines such as British Airways and Virgin Atlantic. I'm gonna go with British Airways first, and in a recent announcement, actually not really announcement, but more on a recent posting here on Routes Online, there's a report now that we will be seeing some gradual resumption of flights in the month of July for British Airways long haul, especially to certain destinations in Asia, and among them, as I mentioned, Shanghai here will have a once daily 777 set to begin. There is no date though, exactly when this will be resumed, but the indications will be next month and gradually down the road as British Airways resumes their plans of flights. Now, British Airways will be planning to resume flights to select cities in the Asia Pacific region. Among them include Beijing, New Delhi, Dubai, Hong Kong, Mumbai, Seoul, Shanghai, Singapore, and Tokyo Haneda. So this is very good news for, and one of the very actually I would say the resumptions of flights to and from Europe to Asia. So good news along with the Asian-based carriers that have slowly started to resume their operations. So now we're seeing some of the European carriers, such as from the UK, start their services again, which a good indication of recovery. Now, the other British carrier that I will be looking at is Virgin Atlantic, and on the same day that British Airways announced that they would resume flights, we are gonna be seeing some resumptions of flights from Virgin Atlantic, and Hong Kong will be the first destination on the 20th, and then the following day we'll see flights to Shanghai on the 21st. Along with Hong Kong and Shanghai, you'll see the other destinations of Orlando, New York, and Los Angeles. So this is another good news. Now, as I mentioned with the UK though, however, I do have to address this because the UK has the policy of the 14-day quarantine for arriving passengers. So that is something to keep in mind, and until those ease, I think it's going to be a bit difficult, but I think it now with these flights, good indication otherwise that these flights will be resuming. Now, in the other news, with more flights that are resuming, will be in Vietnam. And in Vietnam, we've had reports, and over the time, the last few months, we've seen the resumption of domestic travel. And a lot of these airlines are now reporting that their domestic capacity is at the levels comparable to before the pandemic. Great news, and being Vietnam one of the leading airlines in the aviation recovery along with China and South Korea, we also now see plans in July to resume select destinations around their international network. So, for example, here in Vietnam Airlines, um, current flight schedule plans last updated June 5, we see that in July we see plans to operate out of Hanoi and to Frankfurt and Paris. So these are just some of the cities, and also we're gonna see some Northeast Asian destinations. So we also see destinations in China and Korea. Some of these flights will not be operating daily. These are probably going to be less than daily flights, once or twice a week in some cases. We might see some regular runs. So for example, here Ho Chi Minh, Singapore, Ho Chi Minh, Kuala Lumpur. Well, those may run daily. We might see some of the returning flights not operate on a daily basis in return. So this is good news. And however, I will mention that there is still a suspension of flights for Vietnam Airlines going to Japan, and also going to select cities in Europe. So, for example, Hanoi, London, Ho Chi Minh, London, and also to Australia too. So there are no flights right now with Vietnam Airlines into those sectors. But for the most part, they are planning their recovery around next month. So this is something that I think this will change, though. Some of these destinations and schedules will change. So we do have to keep in mind that we have to keep an eye on these schedules. Now, the last airline I want to cover today is Royal Brunei Airlines, and in a recent update, actually just came out just yesterday. Royal Brunei has updated their flight schedules for the month of June, actually the months of June, July, and August of this summer, and they are going to be continuing to operate a limited schedule. Their flight schedules are going to be from Brunei to Bandar Seri Begawan to Kuala Lumpur, Singapore, Melbourne, Hong Kong, and Manila. And this is also going to go along with the connecting travel and transit travel clearance that they're now getting in Singapore, though there isn't any now. And I'll actually mention that because they are currently in working with the Civil Aviation Authority of Singapore for transit travel for going to London. And right now, the plan for Royal Brunei is to have their travelers and customers go through the Royal Brunei flights to Singapore in July and August to coordinate with the to actually coordinate to actually be able to connect to the Singapore Airlines flight every Thursday. So it says here, for example, SQ322 every Thursdays, and on the return they will be able to connect from the UK in Singapore via SQ317 every Monday for the connecting flight the following day. Now, the airline here in this statement, they have advised travelers that, and I'll read this here because this is something important to note. A quote from the Royal Brunei Airlines website update. In the event that transit is permitted, guests will be required to purchase the Singapore Airlines flight sector themselves as a separate booking. So there you go. That's just what's going on with the transit for those who are planning to travel to Brunei from Europe anytime soon. Another thing to note, I mentioned this in a few updates a while back, that the RB Link flights throughout Borneo is still suspended, and so far there is no indication again that they will resume flights until after November 30th. So there you go. Now for a more updated, a more detailed schedule of the flight schedules, we see it here actually. So again, very similar to the most bare bones schedules of the airlines that we're seeing here. And there you go, Brunei to Singapore. These schedules will be coordinating We'll be in coordination with the Singapore Airlines flight schedules for the Singapore London sector, and then you have the Melbourne flights and also Manila. So basically, once or twice a week, very limited schedules. And as we see it here, again, this is their July and August schedules as well. So that's very much a very update of what's going on with the aviation industry right now in the Asia Pacific, some of the big headlines, and it's glad to see that we're now starting to see some flights from the UK to Asia, as well as some airlines that are actually having some signs of optimism of the aviation recovery, um, like such as in the case of China Eastern and their plans for the Hainan-based carrier. Um, that area, I will probably mention that, while Hainan, it is a major Chinese tourist attraction, especially from mainland China, and they've been trying to get tourists from other parts of the world. But I wonder, how do you see the success or the probability of success of this airline, and do you see it being competitive in what I actually would see when it comes to the market going to and from Hainan Island? And when you look at the airlines that Chinese travelers can take going to that island, it does look a bit competitive given the situation with the Chinese carriers, that there's a lot of them. Um, what are your takes on these stories or other stories from throughout the Asia Pacific? Definitely would love to hear your take on this week's updates. And if you have anything else, feel free to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel. Once again, this is Flights in Asia. Thank you for watching, and stay safe and have a great day.